There are places in America where the past isn't dead. It's not even past. It breathes in the soil, whispers on the wind, and stains the very foundations of the homes people built to forget it. These aren't your typical haunted houses, with rattling chains and things that go bump in the night. No, these sites are something more unsettling. They're cursed. Cursed by events so tragic, so deeply unjust, that the land itself seems to be crying out in pain. This isn't a search for ghosts. It's a deep dive into the echoes of history, into the unresolved anguish that can poison a place for generations. We're going to journey to the forgotten corners of the country, to places where progress was built on a foundation of profound disrespect, where idyllic suburbs hide a grotesque secret, and where the land itself seems to hold a grudge. These are the sites haunted not by spirits, but by memory. Places where a historical wound has never healed, and the curse is that relentless, nagging reminder of a debt that has yet to be paid. So, what happens when the ground beneath your feet refuses to forget what you've buried?
You know the American dream, right? Beautiful house and a quiet, planned community. Perfectly manicured lawns, kids playing in the street, a feeling of safety, of having finally made it. This was the vision sold to the folks moving into the Newport subdivision in Crosby, Texas for families like Sam and Judith Haney in the early 1980s. It was their forever home, the perfect place to raise their kids. They picked a plot, built their dream house, and decided to add the final touch, a swimming pool. The heavy machinery started churning up the earth, and then everything stopped. The contractors had found something. It was a coffin, then another. The Haneys and soon their neighbors were about to learn a horrifying truth. Their suburban dream was built directly on top of a nightmare, the forgotten Black Hope Cemetery. The story of Black Hope goes all the way back to the end of the Civil War. A plantation owner named Mercer McKinney willed a piece of his land to his former slaves. On that land, they built a life, built a church, a school, and a cemetery to lay their loved ones to rest. They called it Black Hope. For decades, it was a place of dignity. But time, as it does, started to erase their story. The last known burial in Black Hope Cemetery was in 1939. The wooden grave markers rotted, the community scattered, and the memory of the cemetery just faded away. Then, in the 70s and 80s, Houston started booming. Developers, hungry for land, saw the overgrown fields of Crosby as a blank slate. Any records of the Black Hope community and its sacred burial ground were either lost, ignored, or simply not considered important. The land was cleared, the ground was leveled, and the dead were forgotten. That is, until the new residents started digging. Discovering the graves was just the beginning. The Haneys had the remains of two people, Charlie and Betty Thomas, respectfully moved to another cemetery, thinking they'd done the right thing. But the ground had been disturbed, desecration was done, and that's when the curse started to wake up. It began with small things you might try to explain away. Judith Haney said a clock in her bedroom started glowing with a weird blue light and sparking, even when unplugged. A heavy sliding glass door she knew she'd locked was found wide open. A pair of her favorite shoes vanished only to reappear days later, caked in mud, right near where the graves had been. Annoying? Yes. But they were just warnings. Soon things escalated, and not just for the Haneys. Families all over the subdivision started reporting a whole list of terrifying and tragic events. They talked about sudden financial ruin, about aggressive illnesses doctors couldn't explain. Marriages buckled and broke under the strain. There were whispers of sudden, unexpected deaths that just didn't make sense. The feeling of being watched was everywhere. People heard knocking on their walls at night and saw shadowy figures at the edge of their vision. One family's kids' toys would turn on by themselves in the middle of the night, filling the house with a horrible chorus of electronic jingles. Another homeowner, just doing some gardening, dug up a human skull, a grim reminder of the dozens of bodies still buried just inches beneath their homes, their pools, their kids' swing sets. The Black Hope Curse, as it's now known, isn't a traditional haunting. It's born from the systemic erasure of a people's history. The curse isn't about some vengeful ghost. It's about the deep, spiritual wound that's created when sacred ground is violated. The pioneers of Black Hope were given that land to build a legacy. That legacy was literally paved over. Their final resting place was turned into someone's backyard. Is it any wonder the land itself seems to be screaming? The terrible luck that hit the residents of Newport feels like a direct reflection of the disrespect shown to the dead. The loss of peace, of security, of well-being. That's what happens when you build a dream on top of someone else's desecrated grave. Black Hope Cemetery is a terrifying reminder that some histories refuse to be erased. They just fester, waiting for the right moment to claw their way back to the surface, demanding a justice that can never really be given. The ground remembers. It doesn't forgive. There's a place in northern Georgia of breathtaking beauty. A huge stretch of deep blue water sparkling under the sun, with nearly 700 miles of shoreline dotted with marinas and quiet coves. Lake Lanier is one of the most popular recreational lakes in America, drawing over 11 million people a year to boat, fish, and swim. But just beneath that beautiful surface lies a dark, hot, waterlogged history that many believe has turned this reservoir into one of the deadliest bodies of water in the country. You see, Lake Lanier isn't natural, not at all. It's a man-made creation, born in the 1950s, when the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers decided to dam the Chattahoochee River for flood control and to power Atlanta. To make the lake, they had to drown the entire valley below. And in that valley was a town called Oscarville. Oscarville was a thriving, predominantly African-American town. It had farms, homes, churches, even a racetrack. But as the plan for the lake moved forward, the residents were forced out. Their land was bought up, often for pennies on Thedler, and their homes were abandoned. They could only watch as the water slowly crept up, swallowing their fields, their roads, their entire lives. But it wasn't just homes and businesses that were submerged. The valley was home to more than 20 cemeteries. The Corps of Engineers claims they moved all the marked graves they could find. But what about the unmarked ones? It's the old family plots, the burial grounds of slaves, and even older? The sacred ancestral lands of the Creek and Cherokee people who were there long before Oscarville? To disturb a burial site, especially in Native American tradition, is to invite sorrow and unrest. Many believe that countless graves still lie at the bottom of Lake Lanier, their peace shattered by the deep water above. This desecration, this flooding of sacred ground, is what many believe is the source of the lake's deadly curse. And deadly it is. The numbers are staggering. Since its creation, over 700 people have died in Lake Lanier. The drownings are often bizarre. Experienced swimmers suddenly dragged under by a force they can't see. Boaters feeling as if they've been pushed or pulled right off their own boats. People simply vanish from the surface. Their bodies sometimes found weeks later in places that had already been searched. In 2024, there were at least 3 drowning deaths, and by mid-June 2025, Another 3 people had already drowned, matching the previous year's total. One 73-year-old man died when his boat seat inexplicably came unbolted, throwing him into the water. Divers who have braved the murky depths tell of a disorienting, chilling world below. They talk about seeing the ghostly shapes of submerged farmhouses and roads disappearing into the gloom. Some have even reported feeling like they've been touched or grabbed by unseen hands while navigating the underwater ghost town. The most famous legend is that of the Lady of the Lake. In 1958, a woman named Delia Mae Parker Young lost control of her car and plunged off a bridge into the new lake. Her body wasn't found for over a year. Ever since, people have reported seeing the ghost of a woman in a blue dress, wandering the shores or floating just under the surface, her arms outstretched as if she's asking for help. Of course, skeptics point to more logical reasons for the high death toll. The lake is deep, with pockets of shockingly cold water, submerged debris from Oscar-villowed trees, fence posts, entire buildings creates hidden dangers. And, of course, the sheer number of visitors, sometimes drinking, increases the chances of an accident. But for many, those explanations just don't cut it. They don't explain the utter strangeness of so many of the deaths, or that palpable sense of dread so many visitors feel. They see the lake's deadly reputation as the direct result of its violent birth. It's a place built on loss. The water that gives life and fun to millions is the same water that erased a community and desecrated its dead. The curse of Lake Lanier is the curse of displacement. You can't just flood the past and expect it to stay buried. The spirits of the lake might not just be the ghosts of those who drowned, maybe the echoes of an entire community whose homes, history, and graves are all lost in that watery abyss. The lake took everything from them, and now, it seems, it continues to take more.
The threads connecting these forgotten histories are often buried, not just in the ground, but in old archives, newspaper clippings, and local memories. Uncovering them takes persistent digging. If you find these explorations into the dark corners of American history as compelling as we do, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. You won't miss our next journey into the unresolved pain of the past, as we continue to unearth the stories that refuse to stay buried. Your support lets us keep digging, keep questioning, and keep telling the tales of America's most cursed and forgotten sites. On Franklin Boulevard in Cleveland, Ohio, there's a 4-story Victorian mansion that looks like it was ripped straight out of a horror novel. With its stone face, creepy turrets, and grimacing gargoyles, Franklin Castle just radiates a feeling of menace. It's widely called the most haunted house in Ohio, a place where tragedy, rumor, and death have piled on top of each other for decades, creating a feeling of sadness and dread you could almost touch. But the curse of Franklin Castle isn't just about ghosts. It's about the dark, twisted story of the family that built it. The story starts in the 1880s with Hannes Tiedemann, a rich German immigrant who co-founded a local bank. He built the castle as a monument to his success, a grand home for his wife, Louise, and their family. But that grand dream was almost immediately buried in grief. The family's first decade in the castle was just one death after another. In 1881, Tiedemann's 15-year-old daughter, Emma, died. Just weeks later, his elderly mother passed away. In the next few years, 3 more of his infant children died from different illnesses. Now, for a Victorian family, child mortality was tragically common. But the sheer amount of death inside the castle walls started fueling dark rumors. Whispers spread that Hannes Tiedemann wasn't a grieving father, but a cruel, domineering monster. The rumors only got worse after his wife, Louise, died in 1895. The official causes of death were all natural, but the stories told a different tale, that Tiedemann's cruelty had somehow caused their deaths. It was during this time that Tiedemann started massive renovations, adding many of the features that now give the castle its sinister reputation. He built a huge ballroom on the fourth floor and, according to legend, riddled the house with secret passageways and hidden rooms. Why? Some say it was just the architectural style, but local lore has a much more chilling idea. He was creating places to hide his dark secrets. Persistent rumors, though never proven, claimed he murdered his niece in one secret passage and his mistress in another. Tiedemann sold the castle and died in 1908, having outlived all his children. For a while, the house was quiet, but in 1921, it was sold to the German Socialist Party, adding a new layer of darkness. Rumors swirled that it was a den for spies and a site for political assassinations. The castle's modern reputation for being haunted really took off in 1968 when the Romano family bought it. They reported paranormal activity almost right away. Their kids talked about a ghostly friend, a little girl who cried a lot. Mrs. Romano heard organ music from nowhere and felt the presence of a woman she believed was Louise Tiedemann. The activity got so bad they brought in priests for an exorcism and fled the house soon after. Later owners kept reporting chilling events. One owner ran ghost tours and supposedly found human bones in a hidden closet. In the 1980s, the castle was bought by Michael DeVinco, Judy Garland's last husband, but even he couldn't stand the oppressive atmosphere and sold it. In 1999, an arsonist set a fire that caused massive damage. Today, the castle is a private residence, undergoing extensive restoration, but the stories won't die. People still report seeing the lady in black, believed to be Louise, staring sadly from a tower window, and hearing the sounds of children crying, footsteps in the empty ballroom, and doors slamming on their own. The curse of Franklin Castle is a curse of accumulated sorrow. Every tragedy, every rumor, seems to have been absorbed by its stone walls. It's a place where one family's pain became the foundation for generations of fear. Whether Hannes Tiedemann was a monster or just a man broken by loss, his grief created a legacy of darkness the house can't seem to shake. It stands as a monument not to wealth, but to misery, a place where the past is actively, terrifyingly present. In the vast, empty landscape of the American West, there's an area of about 25,000 square miles between Reno, Las Vegas, and Fresno that's earned a chilling nickname, the Nevada Triangle. It's a place of stark, rugged beauty, watched over by the huge peaks of the Sierra Nevada mountains. It's also a place where people and their planes just disappear. For over 60 years, this region has become a black hole of mystery, swallowing an estimated 2,000 aircraft, many without a trace. The sheer number of disappearances is what makes the Nevada Triangle so unnerving. While the Bermuda Triangle gets all the fame, the Nevada Triangle is statistically way more active. We're talking about an average of nearly 3 planes a month vanishing over the last 60 years. And these aren't just weekend pilots in small planes. The list includes experienced aviators and military aircraft. They fly into the Triangle, and they're never heard from again. The case that really put the Triangle on the map was the disappearance of Steve Fawcett in September 2007. Fawcett was a world-famous adventurer, a man who flew solo around the globe in a balloon. He was an incredibly skilled pilot. He took off from a private ranch in Nevada for what should have been a short, easy flight. He had plenty of fuel. The weather was clear. He just vanished. What followed was one of the biggest search and rescue operations in U.S. history. For weeks, teams scoured the rugged terrain, but found nothing. No wreckage, no emergency signal, nothing. It wasn't until over a year later that a hiker, way off any trail, stumbled upon Fawcett's ID cards. This finally led searchers to the crash site, high in the mountains. His plane had apparently flown straight into a mountainside. The official report blamed a severe downdraft, a sudden, powerful rush of air that his plane couldn't overcome. It's a plausible, scientific explanation. Experts point out that the Sierra Nevada mountains create violent, unpredictable weather with mountain waves that can tear a small plane apart. But that explanation doesn't satisfy everyone. It doesn't quite explain the 2,000 other planes that have disappeared. It doesn't explain the cases where experienced military pilots, flying in formation, have vanished in clear skies, or why so few distress signals are ever heard. Of course, the area's closeness to Area 51 has fueled all sorts of theories, from secret military aircraft to UFOs. But maybe the curse is something older, something in the land itself. This is a vast, untamed wilderness. Is it possible there are forces at play here, magnetic anomalies, or something else we just don't understand, that interfere with both machines and people? The curse of the Nevada Triangle is one of pure uncertainty. There's no haunted house to investigate. The curse is the landscape itself, vast, indifferent, and brutally efficient at erasing any trace of human presence. For the families of the missing, there's no closure, just an agonizing question mark. Their loved ones were swallowed by the sky, their final moments a complete mystery. This void of information is what makes the triangle so terrifying. It's not a story of ghosts, but of a complete and total absence. It's a place on the map where the normal rules seem to bend, where the sky can just open up and take you without warning or a trace.
In Florence, Alabama, stands Sweetwater Mansion, a graceful antebellum home built in 1835, with its grand columns and sprawling grounds. It looks like a perfect piece of the Old South. But like so many places from that era, its beauty is built on a foundation of pain, and its elegant rooms are filled with the echoes of a deep, unresolved sorrow. The mansion's curse isn't about violence, but about a grief that has refused to leave for over a century. The mansion's story is tied directly to the Civil War. It was occupied by Robert Patton, who would later become Alabama's governor. During the war, its basement was used as a makeshift hospital for both Union and Confederate soldiers, a place of unimaginable suffering and death. The very ground absorbed the trauma of the conflict. The most defining legend of Sweetwater centers on one of Governor Patton's sons, Billy. The story goes that after Billy died in the war, his mother was so consumed by grief that she couldn't bear to bury him. According to the darkest version of the tale, she kept his body hidden inside the house, in a strange, doorless room in the basement that can only be seen through a small window. That story, true or not, captures the essence of Sweetwater's haunting. It's a place soaked in the pain of loss, and this pain has shown itself in all sorts of paranormal activity. Visitors and caretakers talk about an overwhelming feeling of sadness that hits them in certain rooms. The most common ghost is that of a Confederate soldier. One caretaker famously told the story of coming downstairs to find a phantom casket in one of the main rooms. Inside lay a soldier in a tattered uniform who she believed to be one of the Patton sons, his funeral playing out over and over. The house seems to hold the impressions of everyone who lived there. People report seeing women in 19th century dresses, hearing the laughter of children who aren't there, and smelling phantom pipe smoke. Paranormal investigators, including the team from the TV show Paranormal State, documented doors moving on their own, heard unexplained footsteps, and even saw a ceiling tile fly across a room. Their recordings captured whispers, some pleading for help, others warning them to leave. One of the strangest things about the mansion is a room that supposedly locks women inside. A former caretaker was so terrified after being trapped for hours that she refused to enter most of the house, living in just 2 rooms she felt were safe. Many think this is the ghost of Billy Patton, either playing tricks or acting out of some darker motive. The curse of Sweetwater Mansion is the enduring power of human emotion. It suggests that grief powerful enough, trauma deep enough, can permanently stain a place. The house is a container for the sorrow of the Patton family and the pain of the soldiers who died in its basement. It's haunted by a history it can't escape. The ghosts, the voices, the weird happenings, they're all symptoms of a wound that has never healed. Sweetwater Mansion is a beautiful, tragic monument to the fact that some homes aren't just filled with memories, they're imprisoned by them. The places we've looked at aren't just one-offs. They're focal points of a darkness that echoes all across the American landscape. Themes of desecrated ground, unresolved tragedy, and mysterious loss are woven into the folklore of countless other spots, each with its own terrifying story. Take the Devil's Backbone in the Texas Hill Country. It says, a stretch of ruggedly beautiful land that was the site of violent clashes between settlers and Native American tribes. For generations, people have reported strange things along this haunted highway. They talk of seeing spectral Spanish monks, ghostly Native American warriors, and even the full apparition of a Confederate cavalry troop galloping silently through the hills. The land itself, scarred by a history of conflict, seems to be replaying its most traumatic moments. Or think of the legends of cursed treasures hidden in the Rocky Mountains. One of the most famous is about a huge cache of French gold from the 18th century, protected by a deadly curse. The story says the prospectors who buried it were struck down by sickness and bad luck. For over 200 years, treasure hunters have looked for it. Many have met with tragic ends, accidents, violence, or just vanishing into the wilderness. The curse supposedly attaches itself to anyone who seeks the gold, turning the dream of wealth into a nightmare. These stories, and so many others, all point to the same unsettling truth. A curse is often just another name for history's long shadow. It's the consequence of a debt that was never paid for stolen land. A desecrated grave, a forgotten tragedy, or an unjust death. These places aren't just haunted, they're reminders. They are living archives of the pain we've tried to pave over, build on top of, and forget. So what is a curse? Is it some supernatural spell? A blast of dark energy that infects a place? Or is it something more human? As we've walked through these forgotten histories, it's hard to ignore the pattern. A curse seems to be what happens when a deep historical wound is left to fester. It's the voice of the silenced, the rage of the disrespected, the sorrow of the forgotten. In Houston, a suburban dream becomes a nightmare because it was built on the erased legacy of the Black Hope community. In Georgia, the beautiful waters of Lake Lanier are seen as deadly because they hide the drowned history of a town and its sacred burial grounds. In Ohio, the stones of Franklin Castle seem to cry with the sorrow of a family destroyed by tragedy. In the skies over Nevada, a void continues to swallow plains. A chilling reminder that some parts of this world are still untamed and indifferent to us. These places aren't just haunted by ghosts, they're haunted by injustice. They're haunted by grief. They're haunted by the stubborn memory of the land itself. The paranormal activity, the feeling of dread, the strings of bad luck. Maybe they aren't attacks from vengeful spirits, Maybe they're just the natural reaction of a place that has been profoundly wronged. It's the echo of a story that's screaming to be told, a pain that demands to be felt. So maybe the question isn't just, are these curses real? The more important question is, what's the cost of forgetting? These stories teach us that the past is never really gone. It seeps into the foundations of our homes, bubbles up from the bottom of our lakes, and whispers to us from the shadows. The real curse, perhaps, isn't the haunting itself, but our own refusal to listen to the stories the land is trying to tell us, to acknowledge the debts we still owe. And until we do, these places will remain cursed, forever held in the grip of a history that refuses to be forgotten.